Right, here we go. Hi, everybody. It's the Gin&Tonic show. It's time again this week on a Friday. It's the 2nd of November. And unfortunately, it's without Rob tonight. He's going to maybe join us later. I'm not 100% sure. Abu is here. And if anybody else wants to come on, you're welcome. Please send a message to me. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this, monitoring three things at the same time. And just send it to Bernard Long. And this is the guy on Facebook with the blue fish. And as you can hear, I'm from Australia today. Okay, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be answering some questions. I have just one single video with some crazy comments, which we're going to discuss a little bit. And if there is anything else, just give me the questions thank you very much to Dawa Man. I've written them down and we'll get to them a little bit later. Okay, Abu, welcome. Are you going to be saying anything? Do you have any topic today, or are we just going to wing it?
I don't have any specific topic. I have some things I could talk about, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right, brilliant. All right, then let me just go according to plan and the way that we normally don't do this. Let me start off with a bit of news because we have a Texas Imam. And no, this is not our village idiot, Kenny. This is a Nick Pelletier. He speaks out against child abuse at the hands of Muslim Imams and Muslims in general. Like, for example, womanizing scholar Norman Ali Khan, or there's a guy called Siraj Vahaj, and his son launched a jihadist death camp in New Mexico, training children to be school shooters. Now, they protect these perpetrators. And this is why I enjoy people like this Texas Imam Nick Pelletier, who openly addresses issues within the Muslim community. He does not hide like a lot of other Muslims that we know do, but he openly talks about them and says, listen, this is not what we're supposed to do. This is not the way that we should act. And I commend this Imam, who is not just, bashing atheists or lying and deceiving others, but is openly talking about it. And I wish more Muslims would do that. And then in a different story, we have another Texas Imam, Raid Saleh Al-Rusan, and he's the founder of the Tajweed Institute of Houston. He does the opposite. He calls on Muslims to kill Jews, because he is citing a famous hadith: judgment day will not come until the Muslims fight the Jews. The Muslims will kill the Jews, and the Jews will hide behind the stones and the trees. And the stones and the trees will say, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. And this is what an imam in Texas is saying. And that I find really unbelievable. I really find that unbelievable. But there's good news too. Asia Bibi will not be hanged, a court in Pakistan has decided. Okay, now I don't know if I need to go back and explain everything. This girl went to living in a village in Pakistan, and the other villagers said she was drinking from the well. Don't drink from this because she's a Christian. And then later on, they accused her of saying something bad about the Prophet, and she was sentenced to death. But then somebody said, no, come on, this is stupid. We're not going to do it. Yes, we have a blasphemy law, but this woman did not really do anything. All we have here are allegations. So the court decided, no, we're not going to hang her. But now the funny thing is, instead of saying, thank goodness we have some common sense here, Islamic fundamentalists are demanding the judge be killed who let her off. Now, Pakistan's blasphemy law, I mean, this is outrageous, okay? Thankfully, the Irish one was abolished last week, but the Pakistani one is still in full swing. And this is absolutely amazing. Okay, let me quickly go through some of the comments now, because I had both my eyes on my list. Hello, welcome everybody. Happy Friday. Norman Ali Khan is the biggest hypocrite. Yeah, absolutely. And in stops you as an atheist. How do you account for having consciousness which cannot be naturally explained using the Marshall? We've been through this. I don't know how many times do we need to say this. I don't get it. Marshall, come on. You've been here on the Gin&Tonic show. I've explained this 50 million times, if not more. We have 3 topics, areas, regions where we don't have an explanation yet. That is the origin of the universe, the origin of life, and the origin of consciousness. We don't know. So I do not account for anything. And if you call me atheist, I don't label myself as atheist. I'm a person without a God belief because the word atheist carries so much baggage. I resent the word. I do not use the word for myself. I don't know why this is so difficult to understand. I do not label myself as atheist because of the baggage. If you say to me, okay, I understand atheist is a person without a God belief, then I'll label myself atheist. But anything other than that, I'm out. As a person without a God belief, I don't account for anything. Least of all consciousness, least of all the universe, least of all. I do not have an opinion on this because, number one, I, as a person, I do not know because I'm not a specialist. Number two, as far as I know, we don't know this. And number two, why don't you get down and learn about it and find out where consciousness comes from? Sorry, Abu.
No, I want to suggest to Marshall that there is the theory that I think is most promising is a theory called integrated information theory. So I gave them a link to my channel that is about that topic. But it's an interesting topic. It is true we don't yet have an explanation for that. But I think the most promising theory is integrated information theory.
But that still doesn't explain how consciousness derived, developed, or where it came from, or where it first appeared. It's just an explanation of what it is.
Yes, but if you could if you could test that experimentally, and there are attempts to test it experimentally, and you could be fairly sure, or you have good reasons to believe that that is like how consciousness works, then you can make up like very clear evolutionary biological reasons for why we have consciousness.
Okay, yeah.
For example, do you know this kind of CAPTCHA problems that you have to solve, prove that you're not a robot, for example. The reasons why it's hard for computers to solve those kind of problems is because since they don't have a conscious image of a picture, they can't like rule out many alternatives. There's a long explanation. A guy that explains that in detail is Christoph Koch. But that's another topic.
Okay. And Pio says, I'm in Gin&Tonic Discord. Yeah, I think we're not being that active because during the week, I'm not really that interested in Islam, I must admit. So this week I launched 2 videos. So this is unusual for me, to be so active. So the Discord server is set up, yes, and it's there, but I'm not really that active. So shame on me for that. Oh, goodness. Okay, let's quickly do a couple of crazy comments. It's all from one single video, and I see that the resolution is not so good. Why is that? Sorry. Let's jack it up a bit. There we go. Now it should be a bit clearer. Now, This is an apple fell to the ground and Newton discovered gravity. Thousands of Palestinians thousands of Palestinians fall, and no one has discovered humanity. Palestine will be free one day, inshallah. I find this such a stupid comment. I mean, this is something that I would actually like to discuss a little bit later. What is this Palestine? What is a Palestinian? And what does that have to do with humanity? I would love to have a discussion on that. Maybe somebody can explain it to me. Now, this is a video on Ali Dawa, where he is talking to a Jew, apparently. And the comments on this are, they are priceless. And this is a reply. So somebody here says, so there's thousands of Palestinians and no one has discovered humanity. Palestine will be free one day, inshallah. And somebody replies, Palestine is already free. It's called Israel. I think this is so great. I think this is funny that somebody does have a sense of humor here, because I think it's so sad. It is such a terrible war. It is such a terrible situation, such a terrible condition that we have. It's I don't know what to label it. Okay, then somebody comes up with, Wallahi, you'd have spat on his face. He killed our children in Palestine and is justifying it. Advice to Ali Dawa, you should not smile in this dog's presence. Subhanallah, the double standard in the dunya. Okay, I think this is quite sad. I think this is really, really sad that a Muslim will tell another Muslim that he should have spat in his face. Is that the only way that he can argue? Doesn't he know that the Quran says exactly the opposite? That you should argue, that you should go and present arguments in a good way, in a polite way. In chapter 16, sentence 125, that's what the Quran says. And this guy says, no, we don't want arguments. Just spit on him. And this is one Jew, okay, who's saying the situation in Palestine, the situation in Israel is not so clear. And he says, he killed our children in Palestine. Our children. Like, I don't understand it. Okay, let's go to the next one. The answer to this. Now, something I want to point out, there are 19 people here who give him a thumbs up for this. That yes, Ali Dawa should have been spitting at the guy in his face. And 19 people say, yes, thumbs up. That is the way to handle this. I don't get it. And then somebody comments, I totally agree with you, brother. Imagine if a Muslim person makes such statement, confessing and praising killing of innocents. I don't understand what it is with innocence. Why do they always have to add innocence? Why don't they just say people? That is what I find really sad. Okay, that's what I find terrible. And then finally, Israelis are the most weakest people in the world. They are the people. No, they are the people, are backbone behind all the violence in the world, even Middle East. They never come front and fight. They put other people in trouble and use their situation. You know, it's horrendous for me to see this. You know, it's sad for me to think that there are people on this planet who actually think like this. Now, number one, Israelis are actually incredibly strong, because there's how many, 9-10 million people in Israel, and that's it. And they are holding all the Muslim countries, or Muslim majority countries around them, at bay. Now, there are apps being developed in Israel. I think half the scientists who have received, the laureates who received a Nobel Prize, are Jewish.
Actually,
as opposed to...
They're not even any kind of Jewish. They're Ashkenazi Jews. So I don't know. I mean, the population of Israel is slightly less than 9 million.
Yeah, something like
but
that.
I don't know how many percent of them are Ashkenazi Jews either. So, But I think the Ashkenazi Jews actually are a minority in the whole society. But if you look at the upper, I think it is the case that every like prime minister, or is it president? What do they have? Is Benjamin Netanyahu prime minister or president?
They have both.
They have both. I'm so sorry. I should know this, but I think every like leader has been Ashkenazi Jews, despite that they are a minority.
But
And
then,
it's also,
yeah, but they're not weak.
no. Ashkenazi Jews are definitely not weak. I think Nietzsche says in on the genealogy of morality that if the Jews wanted to, they could become the new what word did they use? I think he used aristocracy or something like that. I'm not sure, but he thought that if they wanted to, they could take control of Europe. But that's the.
Okay, I disagree with that, but whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
they are not weak.
That was back in the like late 19th century.
Okay.
But they are definitely like Ashkenazi Jews are in relation to their numbers or their percentage of. I don't know the exact percentage, but they're probably just like 1% of the Earth's population, or maybe less than that. And they have, I don't know what it is, 40% of all Nobel Prize winners or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So the funny thing is, this comment shows that the first thing that a lot of these Muslims, that what they think of is violence. I don't know why the solution that they are thinking of is immediately something to do with force. That if you are not using force, if you're not using weapons, if you're not using tanks and planes and battles and killing and destruction, you are automatically weak. And I think we have outlived that. We should be, we should have been done with this. Why would we still need violence? We don't need violence anymore. We have managed to come up with an overkill situation where if we resort to violence, we're just going to wipe out humanity, but we're not going to actually win in any way. I don't get this. I would have thought we're
like
further.
Talking about Ashkenazi Jews. I don't know the exact percentage, but definitely Niels Bohr and Richard Feynman and I think Oppenheimer as well, although I'm not 100% sure. I think I might be wrong about Oppenheimer, but many of those who worked on the Los Alamos project were Ashkenazi Jews. And there's actually been a suggestion that you should kind of retroactively give the Nobel Peace Prize to the inventors of the nuclear weapons because you have created this kind of game theoretical situation that we would wipe out, like maybe would wipe out maybe not whole humanity, but most of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
That has prevented war.
Yeah. Jinn&Tonic show, are you not familiar with the Palestinian exodus where hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their homes? Okay. No, I'm not familiar with that because I don't know what a Palestinian is. I don't know where Palestine is. I really don't know. I mean, Palestine for me is like the Black Forest. There is no ethnicity, there is no language, there is no feature, there is no factor that differentiates somebody from Palestine from any other place in the region except for Jews. So is there any difference? No. And there never was a Palestine.
Yeah, I mean, even like if you go back to and read what it was called in the Hadith and so on, the whole region, that region was called Sham. What, like the Levant, what is today Syria and Lebanon.
Well, you had North Syria and then you had South Syria, but that's it. Then this was sometimes referred to as Palestine because it goes back to the Philistines, but that's it. So no, I am not familiar with any of that. Now let me make something very, very clear. I totally disagree, and I condemn the practice of Israelis in Israel who are trying to populate regions that are not directly under the control the way that it was done, I don't know, 40 years ago. Okay, I totally condemn that. I don't think they should do that. I think we should have a buffer zone. I think we should stay out of those regions just to, I'm not saying this for appeasement purposes. I'm saying this just to stop anybody being able to accuse anyone else of whatever it is they want to accuse them for. And that is, it's just as a matter of policy to stay out of those areas and don't push the issue. It's sensitive enough as it is. And I totally condemn what the Israelis are doing, that they are forcefully settling people there. Okay, I want to be very, very clear on that. Okay, is there anything else? I am the true Israelite. Make Middle East greater Israel. Okay, whatever. Make Lebanon even greater Israel, Palestine. Okay, we can talk about that. Do you want to add some news before I go and answer some questions?
Well, I could add a minor Scandinavian news. It's like the SSU, which is the youth organization of the Social Democrats in Sweden, have been infected by entryism from Islamists in the like south part of Sweden. It's called Skåne, and the main organization is now threatening to expel them. But this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time. It's just now it's coming to the surface. So they have a problem with anti-Semitism and homophobic statements from the leaders in.
Don't we already have enough problems? Oh, goodness. By the way, what is the sentiment with free speech and what the European Court of Human Rights has done?
The sentiments.
Uh-huh.
What do you mean? Like,
okay, what kind of reaction are you getting? Because
okay.
the only thing that I'm getting is shock.
I think it's well, I'm mostly worried about the silence, that you haven't heard enough about it. Like, if you think about it, what it means, I mean, this is a major thing. A European court that has not been elected by you, like for those of you who are living in the European Union, you have not elected this court, and they are saying that you are not allowed to say something about a religion or ideology that its own texts, that is written in their own text. You see what I'm saying? If this is not a violation of freedom of speech, the most basic right that Western society has been built upon, I don't know what it is. So I'm mostly worried about that it's just silence.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is that I really can't understand that. Okay, what they said is, yes, you have free speech. However, okay, they're adamant that the exercise of the freedom of expression carries with it duties and responsibilities, including the duty to avoid, as far as possible, an expression that is in regard to objects of veneration, gratuitously offensive to others and profane. So in other words, you have free speech, but you don't have free speech. You have free speech until we decide it is no longer free speech. So this is crazy. This is really crazy. So just to bring people up to date, what happened is that an Austrian woman made a comment about Muhammad and then asked a question: if a 54-year-old man is interested in having sex with a 9-year-old girl, Is this anything that we should be calling pedophilia? Or is this a pedophile who does this? And for this, she was fined, and then she objected, said no, and she appealed, went higher and higher, and then the European Court of Human Rights ruled yes, the Austrian minor court was quite right in fining her for saying something like that. And that to me is, I don't know, more than a slippery slope, because we have a word for somebody who is interested in underage girls, and that is a pedophile. Now, this is not an insult, okay? This is a statement of a fact. Now, what I always suggest is that if we talk about this, we need to always include according to Islamic texts which have been deemed authentic by Islamic scholars. According to them, the story has it that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. And then you are in the clear. And then there is nothing that anyone can do to you, because all you are doing is you are quoting from the text. And what she was doing is she was, I don't know, paraphrasing or just saying things, and that didn't work. So you need to quote from the Islamic texts. And there it is quite openly said that Aisha herself says, I was 6 when the Prophet married me. And then he picked me up when I was 9. I was still playing with dolls and all this other stuff. Now, we know today that these hadiths, which are deemed authentic, which have are classified as sahih, they are not. Okay, there's a lot wrong with the isnad, with the chain of narration. It's not authentic. So we know today that this is not. But if a Muslim comes to me and says, like what Adnan Rashid said, 100% of the hadith in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari are authentic, 100% are authentic, and they need to be considered as scripture. If that is the case, then it is not me making that claim. Then it is the Muslim who is saying this, who is making this claim. And just the same way as we have a word for the ground that is shaking, which we call an earthquake, we have a word for somebody who's interested in little girls, and that is a pedophile. It's not it's not denigrating. It's not simply insulting somebody. It's a word that we use. It's part of the language. So we can't go around and say, well, the priests who are fondling little boys are pedophiles. The imams who are fondling girls and who are grooming them, they're pedophiles. But Muhammad was not. That doesn't work.
I mean, pedophile is because now they're talking about the diagnosis of pedophilia. Like, pedophilia in itself is rather specific diagnosis. I mean, you can at least imagine yourself a case, someone that is not actually a pedophile marrying a 6-year-old. So yeah, maybe. Like, it's technically possible, but there are today's we have ways to actually test whether someone is a pedophile or not.
Oh, Rafa, yeah, Aisha forced herself on Muhammad, exactly. Like when she forced herself into his dreams. I mean, if you look at the whole story, apparently Muhammad came to Abu Bakr and said, listen, buddy, you're my good buddy, and I think your daughter is so cute. Yeah, but I have already promised her, and I remember she's like 5-6 years old. And Abu Bakr says, yeah, but I promised her to this other guy. You know, like she's a baby, and she's already been promised to somebody else. And then Muhammad said, no, you can't do that. And I fancy her, and I want her because she's appeared in my dreams, and God wants me to have her as a wife. And then Abu Bakr, after a while, then agrees. Okay, and then they get married when she's 6, and then nothing happens until she's 9. And then one day she's playing out in the garden on a swing, and then the woman comes and gets her and says, okay, go to the bedroom, Muhammad is waiting for you. And you have a lot of stories around this. I mean, if you read the Sunnah, this is not just a one-liner or two lines or one paragraph. No, this is quite an intricate story. And now you're supposed to say, well, not really. I mean, what part are you allowed to, what part of the Sunnah are you allowed to say and what not? I mean, it's not my claim. It's not my claim that I maintain that Muhammad is the role model um, for all humans, for all ages, for all times, for all everybody, for the whole universe. Everybody should live according to what Muhammad said. Yeah, but except if he does something negative, well, then no, and you're not allowed to say this anyway. This is quite stupid. Oh boy. Okay, so are we allowed to say that Muhammad was a pedophile? Well, if we say that according to Islamic sources, deemed authentic by Islamic scholars, this is the situation that a 54-year-old man is said to have had sex with a 9-year-old girl. We have a word for that, which is pedophilia. Then I think yes. Now, if you want to be specific and say, well, no, it's a mental condition and there are certain criteria that need to be fulfilled. No, I'm sorry. No, you can't make that up. You can't say that now suddenly you need to include things. I think this is quite straightforward anyway, in my eyes. Maybe I'm being simplistic here, but that's the way that I see it. Any other opinions? Anybody in the chat? Mufti Abulay says the reason scholars say she was 9 because they're scared of breaking the norm, unlike it. Well, what Mufti Abulay says, number one, she was older, which I don't believe either, because I think those isnad are just as faulty as the other ones. And now to go to some obscure hadith somewhere where you have to do higher mathematics. I mean, come on, the God and the Quran is so inept at fourth grade fractions. And now you need to go and calculate, well, the sister was 10 years older and Aisha must have been 15 at the Battle of Uhud or whatever, because girls under 15 were not allowed to be. Come on, please spare me. Why can't you just be honest? Why can't you just say, okay, there you go. That's the claim in the books. We don't agree with that. We think Muhammad was wrong. We don't think that anybody at the age of 54 should have sex with a 9-year-old, full stop. And that's the end of the story. Because I maintain that even if she was 17, it is still, for me, really strange that a 54-year-old man would have sex with a 17-year-old girl. Okay? I mean, this is, I think I find Hugh Hefner, he was a pervert. I mean, at the age of 80 or something, he married a 20-year-old. I think that's a pervert. So I think when he was 50-something or 60 and then he had sex with a 20-year-old, I think there's something wrong. Okay, but then maybe I'm too old and I'm too conservative, but I don't like that. Any other comments? Any other opinions? Any other whatever? In fact, she was 21, but the Islamists reduced her age because Mother couldn't marry an unused woman. Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. I will just repeat this. What Pio just wrote. There's this thing that with the virgin, and she needed to be a virgin. Don't you hate it when you think you're 6 but actually 18 and your sister has to remind you? Oh my goodness, Lily, you're sick. Yes, but I love it. This is so funny. And let me just remind you, a lot of people also don't know is the virgins in heaven, for example. You know how every man is promised a virgin. Please remember, these are reconditioned, refurbished virgins. They've had sex with millions of men. It's just that they have been made to look as though they are a virgin again, because this was so important. It was so important for a woman to be a virgin. This is why Muhammad came up with this idea, or whoever created the figure, the character of Muhammad. For them, it was important that women had to be veiled. They had to be hidden away so that other men could not look at this wife of someone else, because it was a property. And even looking at another woman could be the same as defiling her. And that's why this was, there's lots of stories. Let's not get into that. Okay, I have a couple of questions, 3 from last week. Oh, and I have one from Rafi. Discuss this one. It's funny packaging Islam to Western audiences. Study Quran. I have not read this work, but will comment on one section about women and the permission for the husband to hit a woman. One of the most. Okay, Rafi, do you want to talk about this? Do you want to? Because I'm not going to go to the blog spot now and read this now online. We'll have to do this next week. I have a question from last week, and that is the ex-Muslim movement going to extremes? My answer is no. I think what what ex-Muslims are doing is commendable and extremely valuable. Okay, because it shows Muslims who are incredibly scared of hell, who are extremely scared of being left out in the cold and being left alone without any kind of moral, without any kind of, let's call it spiritual support, that you can survive without Allah, without Muhammad, without the support of the Quran and the Sunnah. You can have a wonderful life. And this is why I love how Vidu and Mimsy, how they are doing this, how they are showing, how happy you can be and how wonderful you can be, even if you have, left Islam behind. And it's quite amazing how other ex-Muslims look at them with suspicion and say, how come they are happy? But this is exactly the point. These are, in my eyes, the role models for everybody to show that you are free from everything. Because, I mean, I don't know, people don't seem to understand what Islam actually is for a person. It takes control of your life. It takes control of your thinking. It tells you what to wear, what to think, what to eat, what to drink, when, what. It tells you everything. Everything is prescribed. You are not allowed to take any decisions on your own. If somebody asks you a question about Islam, you're not even allowed to answer this. You have to go to someone else and say, what should I answer this person? You are not allowed to think for yourself. And this is terrible. And this is why the one thing I have heard from every single ex-Muslim, from every single apostate, I feel free. And this is the one thing I hear from everyone. Everyone else is, there are differences with everyone else, but this is the thing that everyone agrees with, and everybody says this: it's the freedom that you feel when you can finally think for yourself.
I don't feel particularly free when I have to pay taxes.
No, you dodo. I'm talking about your mind.
Where is this? If you walk,
Don't remind me.
I'll tax your feet. Taxman.
Freedom equals, Afrafai, freedom equals following your desires. No, that's not freedom. Definitely not. Freedom is that you are allowed to be who you want to be. It's not following your desires. You fit in with society. It's not that you can just do whatever. I know, but there's a lot of people who think exactly that, and this is why it's maybe good that you're saying this, because we should mention that no, what so many Muslims are saying, yeah, you are an atheist, you are a non-believer just because you want to sin, just because you want to follow your desires, your carnal instincts and things like. No, that's not what it's about. So the answer is, are ex-Muslims, is this, well, it's not a movement, I think. Is it going extreme? No. And I don't think it's a movement. I think there's still too many individuals, I think. And there should be a concerted effort. There should be more people coming together and saying, because I've got a video where the people say, look, what Mariam Namazi did. This was excellent when she said, okay, well, we have this Me Too movement, but I am an apostate because, and I have left Islam because, and that was excellent because it showed that there are huge numbers that are leaving. Is Abu Tablet an incel or a MGTOW? Oh, yes. Hoping for an afterlife is following your desires. Hoping for an afterlife is following your desires. Really? I don't know. You could disprove Islam to a Muslim, but they will still say you want to follow. Yeah, exactly, exactly. This is quite strange. So, and this is quite funny with this. I still don't know how to pronounce Shinyad O'Connor. I mean, if somebody, I mean, she's crazy. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of time for Shinyad O'Connor. Really, I don't. And if this is the kind of person that Muslims want, well, good luck with you. Good luck to you. What is quite funny is that when Muslims come to me and say, why don't you become a Muslim? Well, listen, guys, if I would be a Muslim, I would be asking questions non-stop. And then, I mean, there's nothing that Islam can answer. I always hear Islam is the answer to the question. Okay, well, it depends on the question. If I ask Islam, okay, what is the source of radioactive decay? Can can the Quran answer this question? Absolutely not. So, I don't know. Okay, next question. Or any other comments on this? Abu, you? No. How does Islamic banking work in the West? It doesn't. It doesn't even work in the East. It doesn't even work in Muslim majority countries. Come on. The only funny thing was when I mean, if my wife wanted, for example, a replacement card, I had to go and countersign it as the um, as the husband, as the person in charge of the account, so that my wife could use the card because it broke or it twisted or something or was unreadable and she needed a new one. And I had to go and countersign because she was not allowed to do this as a woman. So as a woman, you're not allowed to. I don't know, but maybe by now you are allowed to. But when I was there, you were not even allowed to open a bank account. It had to be the man opening the bank account and giving permission to the woman to then access the bank account. That was always quite strange. Um, Islamic banking, what is it? Well, it's the same as any other banking. It's just that it has different names. You don't call it interest, you call it fees. But you still pay. You pay for the services of using the bank. If you take a loan, you still need to pay the money back plus an additional fee. It's not called interest, but it's called a fee, which depends on how long and how high. So it's the same thing as interest. It's just called something different. It's a hypocritical system. There's nothing different. There's nothing there. They just say that you're not allowed to charge interest or something, and that it's against the Islamic law, against the Sharia, and therefore you're not allowed to do it, and therefore you don't. But they do anyway. Abu, are you just breathing?
I'm breathing.
Okay.
As long
What do you think of the high apostasy rate of Muslims in America? Okay, we're getting to apostasy just now, because there were questions which Dawaman asked earlier. What is your opinion of the apostate prophet? I think apostate prophet is very effective because he's very authentic. He's very open. He's very, he's like touchable. It's somebody that you can relate to. Somebody who says, "Look, this is me as a person, and this is the way that I was, and this is what I think about this today." And he's not making himself out to be a scholar. He's not making himself to be anything but just a normal person who goes and says, this is what I've been thinking. This is what I've been believing. These are the reasons why I don't. And here's where I am today. And because he is so authentic, because he is so, so real, this is why I like it. I like very much what he's doing. But he's also a little bit aloof. Okay, so he's not really approachable because I also sent him a message. I said, "Listen, come on the show," and blah blah blah. So we're still trying to do that, and I'm very upset that I sent messages to what's the first name, Robert Spencer, to come on the Gin and Tonic show, And now he's decided to go with the apostate prophet. I'm very angry with that. So jealous. Okay, is exorcism real or not? Okay, exorcism is real. A lot of time in, at least in Muslim majority countries. I know that in Saudi, in Abu Dhabi, it wasn't. In Dubai, definitely not. In Qatar, I don't know. But in Saudi, yes, absolutely. I mean, this exorcism thing is run of the mill. I mean, it's not like in the Catholic Church where the guy has to come from all the way from Rome. No, there anybody can do it. You have the instructions in the Sunnah. You are told which sentences to recite in what way to achieve which result. So this is very real. I mean, these ancient superstitions are very difficult to get out of their life. This is part of being a cultural Muslim, is believing that these demons exist, and this is why you need this exorcism. I mean, there's so many superstitions. If you recite the ayat this, then this happens, and if you drink this, if you eat this, if you do this, then this. There's a lot of it. Abu, do you remember all these? Not all of them, but some of these promises.
Which promises?
If you eat 7 dates of a specific type, then you are immune towards all poison, things like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of those things.
Yeah.
I mean, there are claims about Zamzam water and the Black Sea. What is it? This the Black Sea? I don't know what it's called. I made a short video about that. This funny is this Black Sea? I don't know what it's called, but it says that it's a remedy for every disease except death.
Well, Muhammad didn't know about this.
And honey also. If you take honey, it should be.
Yeah, and this is quite strange, because people go and they say, okay, honey is good for everything. And then they say, well, Ibn Sina, for example, he's the greatest medical authority, and his book was read for centuries. And that. Yeah, but he came and he prescribed honey against tuberculosis. And this is quite weird. I mean, no doctor today would say this. Yes, honey is great for you, but why is it good if you put it doesn't really do anything. I mean, some doctors put this on some Petri dishes, and they showed, you see, we had bacteria there and they died. Yeah, because the honey shut out the oxygen. So yes, they died, but that's all. So what are you going to do with that? What do you think of Muhammad Hijab debating David Wood? Okay. I mean, for me, Muhammad Hijab is an idiot. He's a fool. Okay, somebody who, like Hamza Tsotzes, he also was this kind of a guy who used big words but didn't really know what they meant. As soon as you went, just a little bit deeper, he was completely lost. So that's what I think of Muhammad Hijab. Now, David Wood, at least he's got a PhD, okay? And what David Wood can do to Muhammad Hijab is hang him out to dry. The only problem is that you have two guys who are talking about their respective fairy tales. So if you have the one guy arguing for Cinderella and the other guy for Snow White, I mean, how do you do that? So if I believe that Snow White is real, I can of course go and say, haha, you believe in Cinderella. Do you really think this is true? Ha 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 ha. And the other guy is going to do the same thing. So what is the point when you have two guys believing that fairy tales are real? How can these guys argue? Look at the Christian Prince. Christian Prince, I mean, he makes mincemeat out of any Muslim. But when it comes to atheists, he is pathetic. He is so bad. It takes, just 30 seconds and I'll kill him, because he is a Christian and he doesn't know how to handle a non-believer, somebody who does not have a God belief. And this is the point that a lot of people don't see, because they are good in the one area. Like also David Wood, he is excellent when it comes to analyzing Islam and finding the problem areas and putting his finger into the wound and then twisting it where it hurts the most. but he is so susceptible for the same treatment himself. So it's very easy for a hijab to go and say, yeah, but you think, the Trinity and Jesus and which God, and if God was on the cross, who was left in charge in heaven, and things, it's very easy. So what do I think of this? I think it's kindergarten. I don't think it makes any sense, the one talking about the other. That's why I always laugh when Muslims say, yeah, don't talk about my Quran, look at your Bible. It's so stupid. Okay. Abu, what do you think about this?
I don't know who this Mr. Wood is. Is he a
Okay.
Christian?
Yeah. With a PhD in Christianity.
In Christianity? Is that
Yeah,
possible?
yeah. They have PhDs in fairy tales, like Rumpelstiltskin and the Three Little Pigs, and you can write a PhD thesis on this.
Well, there are other fairy tale PhDs, like gender studies, and now there's even something called fat studies that you can get a PhD in.
What studies?
Fat studies.
What is that?
I don't know. You're making up so-called scientific articles about things like related to being fat,
Oh,
and how oppressed you are if you're fat.
Where is Klingshaw nowadays? Quite honestly, I don't know. I mean, I tried keeping up with him. I tried keeping in touch, and I thought that he was going to come around because, I mean, Kling is impressionable. Okay, so he is somebody where you show him a couple of things, he will switch. He was taken in by, I think it was a communist or something, and then he just went off with that, and because he believed that if he is on the social trip and he is doing a service to mankind by looking at Islam, if then he looks back in 20 years and looks what he did on YouTube and things like that, that this will damage his reputation. I maintain it doesn't. I think it's actually more authentic if you keep your past and you show where you were, how you started. I think it makes yourself a more complete person, a rounded person. But he decided not to.
But it's a pity because I'm no fan of communism, but Clinshaw as a person I really liked him.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's a double pity because he had this special touch, bringing in the scholarship, because I am everything that he was not. Because I refuse to go into all this. I refuse to drop names. I refuse to go and, yes, I have read Goldziher and Schacht and all these guys, but I don't like it. I don't like bringing up these guys. And a lot of people accuse me of saying, yeah, but you don't bring in this scholarly approach. No, I don't. And I hate doing it. I'm
I
quite
actually
intentionally not doing it.
I love to do it, but it's a matter of time. You have to, or like, not can be the name dropping part, but like going into different views on historical events and so on.
No, okay. I've just re-upped 2 videos because we were talking about this last week as well, about Islam and violence. So I've uploaded 2 videos which I did on this, which is like over 1 hour and a quarter if you take both together. And I go into great detail there. I mean, this is 6 months of research in this, okay? And I've uploaded them to Dailymotion and to LiveLeak so that they don't disappear so quickly, because it's a highly contentious issue, because it's Islam and violence. And in the one video, I look at Codename Terror, a video that was produced by Hamza Tzortzis when he held a discussion or something. I don't know what you want to call that, in Fanar, which is the Islamic Cultural Center in Doha. And I didn't even know he was there, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I did not know that, because Hamza was there when I was there. And I spent a lot of time in Fana. But nobody told me that he was there. And I just learned of this when the video came out.
Can you post the links to those videos? Because
No, there's too many. Just go look on Daily Motion and just look for stops or stop spamming or something. Because I think if you put the links there, there's always okay, here Daily Motion. I can put this link in here. There you go. So this is me on Daily Motion, and there you can see. Oh shit! Now he's playing this. Oh no! Why is he playing this?
who is playing what?
Why can't I stop this?
But you haven't uploaded this to YouTube.
Why am I now playing? Live Leak is doing this.
Live Leak.
Live Leak started to play the video just because I opened the page.
I mean, when you have to upload like arguments or videos that explains arguments to Live Leak, then something is wrong.
Okay, here's one of them. This is the Live Leak. I'm putting them there because they don't bow to pressure that easily. Whereas Vimeo, for example, closed down my entire channel because I was too violent towards poor Muhammad. Why do they call them Muslim scholars when they have only studied one book? Yes.
Yeah. Richard Dawkins liked to say that for me, a scholar is someone that has read more than just one book.
Yeah. This is so good.
Although that is somewhat straw manning, maybe, since there are.
It's tongue in cheek, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, Islam, like compared to gender studies, it's not that Islamists or Islamic scholars don't produce a lot of work. They have produced, I don't know, perhaps millions of books during the years.
Yes.
But it's about fairy tales.
So anyway, the point that I was making is, yes, I can go pretty deep in the research. Yes, I can be very substantiate. No, how do you call that?
Substantiated.
No, I can substantiate whatever point I make by going pretty deep into the topic and do some pretty deep research. But I don't like throwing names around. I don't like showing off. I think this is stupid. We're not scholars here, so I'm not at that level. Definitely not, and I don't even want to be. Yeah, it's nice to have this with Klingshaw. There we had chats where we went quite deep, but I'm not interested in that. Really, I'm not.
You're not interested. I'm interested in that. It's just that it's a matter of time. You have to.
No, I'm interested in doing it, but not displaying it. Anyway, why are so many Muslims leaving Islam in the West? Okay, now this is a brilliant topic before we go to apostasy, apostates, and then finally into Palestine.
Because truth is a powerful argument.
What is a powerful argument?
Truth.
Yeah, and this is the point. This is, okay. When I went to the mosque, when was this, like a month ago? I went there and I said, listen, we're living in the 21st century. We're living in Europe, and I've come back from the Middle East where it was quite normal to be a Muslim, and nobody looked at you in a funny way, and it was actually expected that you are a Muslim. If you are a non-Muslim, you are an exotic animal. Now, here in Europe, it's different because we are living in the 21st century. A lot of Muslims, their brain, their belief, their thinking, their train of thought, their everything is firmly embedded in the 7th century. And because now They come with their 7th century superstitions, their 7th century beliefs, their 7th century, um, the whole standard, the whole life. I don't
I
know
don't
what to
think it's
call
only
it.
because it's 7th century. I mean, I'm very inspired, and I practice both Vipassana meditation, which is a Buddhist practice, and I also practice Stoicism, and inspired by Stoic text. I read Epictetus now and then to remind myself, and that is very old. So it's not the oldness itself, it's just that Islam comes with a lot of silly things.
Okay, but do you reject anything that is modern?
No.
And there's the difference.
What do you mean?
Well,
No, yeah.
if I go and I say, okay, I have a book here which tells me that Adam and Eve were the first human beings, and I need to believe that there was such a thing as a first human being, then it doesn't make sense, does it? And now suddenly you come into the 21st century of Europe. And now in the 21st century Europe, this concept of a first human being, a first man and a first woman doesn't work. And suddenly you are told, well, what it says in the Sunnah, what it says in Islamic texts, that first there was a man and then the woman was made out of something from the man. Whether this is a rib or not doesn't really matter. And we learn that in reality, it's the other way around. Come on, this is suddenly a shock for the system, that you are told that what
Wait a
the
minute. Are you
Quran,
saying that man comes out of the rib of Eve?
not the rib, no, but the basic form, the basic shape is female, and only when the SRY genes fire, then the ducts, the Wolffian and the Müllerian ducts and all that,
Yeah.
which forms the genitalia, all that happens from the woman. And so the female form is the basis, and then you go into the male form. And if that does not happen, and it doesn't matter whether you have a Y chromosome or not, you will remain a woman. That's why you have a lot of women who don't even know that they're a man because they have a Y chromosome, but something went wrong in the genes and this didn't trigger. And this is the thing. So it's the opposite of what the Quran and what the Sunnah is saying. Then you find the same thing with the flesh being draped around the bones. When you look at reality, it's the opposite. It's the flesh dying in between the digits, in between the fingers, for example, so that you have fingers. So it's the opposite of what the Quran says. So suddenly you are confronted with reality, with what you call truth. And this truth is actually the opposite of what the Quran and what the Sunnah tells you. And now what are you going to do?
But the
So,
sun does set in a muddy pool of water.
of course, yes. So if you have things like that, and then you look at reality, then you either go schizo, or there's something in your brain that suddenly goes, "Oops, I need to rethink this."
And
Now
you
it
know what
depends on
stars?
your level of integrity.
You know what stars are for?
Yes.
You throw. They are thrown at the devils when they
Yes.
go too high up in the sky.
They're missiles.
You can go out and you see that sometimes.
And the sun and the moon are in the same orbit, but the lowest orbit. No, stars are in the lowest orbit. Then you have the sun, and then you have the moon. So,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So this is why when you look at reality, when you look at the truth, you find that it is the opposite of what the Islamic texts tell you. And then what happens? And now something very strange happens. Some people say, "Oh fuck, I'm going to believe what the Quran, what Islam tells me, because after all, we were all created by a God, and the God will know better than we do." And this is why I got the guy when I asked him what happens if the Quran says 1 and 1 is 3, and we know in reality it's 1 and 1 equals 2. Which one do we question? And he says we question maths.
But
Because
I've never seen the sun catch up with the moon.
you see, there you go. So the Quran. So the prediction made by the Quran might just be true, that when they catch up with each other, then that's the end days. Anyway, it's crazy. So when you look at reality and when you look at the Islamic texts, you realize how badly they are written. And if you are somebody who's susceptible to this mumbo jumbo that you get from people like hijab and from others like him, from apologists, then what? Then you're going to believe them and you're going to say, well, I mean, the creator of the universe must know better how much 1 and 1 is. So if the creator of the universe says 1 and 1 is 3, and we puny humans say 1 and 1 equals 2, of course we humans must be wrong. Or you then go and you say, well, actually, no, because we can demonstrate that 1 and 1 equals 2, and we can demonstrate that the opposite is true of what the Quran says. And therefore, I need to rethink this. And this is where we start having doubts. And when you are starting with doubts, then you go and you find, I don't know, consolidate the two. And then it depends on your level of integrity, what is important to you. So somebody like Kenny Boma, for example, he's always the prime example for this. I mean, I showed him that the Quran is wrong. I showed him that the opposite is true. But he chooses to believe the opposite. He chooses to reject reality and says, no, I prefer the make-believe world of the Quran. And then he starts lying and deceiving others and telling them all sorts of bullshit. But that's the way that he is. It's a personal choice that he makes. Oh, boy. Okay, a religious wants to join. Any comment? Okay, can we get a persecuted pig from the Islamic world on the show? Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's quite funny how Muslims have a big mouth when they're in the comments, but when they're here, suddenly they're not. Is there anything Muslims can do to stop the tide of apostates? No, not really. Because the problem is that they're not honest. Okay, if I go to the mosque and I ask the guy, how do you handle reality, the 21st century in Europe today? What do you teach young Muslims when they come to the mosque? Because you also have classrooms here. You do Quran and Islam training, you do courses, you do all sorts of things. What do you teach them about reality? And all he can do, he wants to punch me in the face. It shows you that you can't stop this. They have no answers. This is the problem, that they will think about what the Quran says, but they will not have the possibility to be honest and say, we need to do away with that. They will prefer to change the Quran. They will say, yes, it says that God says that I have expanded the universe, when the word quite clearly is not a verb. But they will change it. So they will change the words of the Quran to make it sound more authentic. And they will change other words as well just to make it sound good. But when you tell them you are changing the Quran, they will say, no, you cannot change the Quran. It's impossible. And then you show them, even if you show them photos of previous versions of the Quran, they will still reject it and say, you doctored them, you deleted this, this is Photoshop or something. They're not real. They will refuse point blank to accept it. Now, if they would, it would be totally different. And this is actually what my vision, my dream, is to go with them. There's two visions. There's two possibilities here. Either we're going to go from 1.4 billion Muslims to 1.4 million. Once we've got that, well, then I don't think the problem is so big anymore. Or we go and get an update that people will appreciate that the Quran is wrong, that the Quran is just a product of a human mind, and it's not a divine, book written by a God in heaven or something like this. I mean, there's too many mistakes and too many inconsistencies and too many contradictions in the book. So those are the two visions that I have, if either one of the two happens, well, I'll be very happy. Abu, what do you think?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in a way, it's really strange that it has survived for such a long time. But
it is. And look, remember you did this background, well, what do you want to call it? This presentation on the Rohingya in Myanmar, in Burma. And it's quite obvious that these are facts that are available to everybody. And even though you presented this, there are still people who will refuse to accept it, who will still say that the Muslims there are being persecuted since just a few years. They don't acknowledge that this is something that has been going on for decades. They don't acknowledge that the whole sequence of events is slightly different. They will put the blame solid on the military doorstep and present this as something that has been happening only recently.
yeah, but I think in that, what you notice that is therein lays the truth that like we are social creatures, and if enough people around us believe one thing, then we are more or less biologically programmed to just follow everybody else around us, despite even if the evidence point in another direction.
Correct. I want to welcome Thunderous. Hi.
Hi guys, you wouldn't believe the difficulty I've had in trying to join you guys tonight. I need someone to come around here and give me a tutorial as to how to operate all these newfangled media apps.
What? You sent me the request, I sent you the link, you click on it and you're here.
I sent that request about an hour ago.
Are you joking?
No, I'm not. I've been sitting here for an hour. I was beginning to think that you guys were boycotting me.
No, I got it.
Do you have Skype?
I wouldn't know how to use it if I did.
Skype.
Yeah,
it's really easy.
I'm sure it is, but not when you're 50 years old like me. It's not.
I'm 78. No, I can't remember how old I am, and I can handle it.
So I have been listening to the program, but I'll let you guys carry on, and then I'll come in the comments when I feel appropriate to.
So you let us do the hard work, and then you just reap the benefits.
Hey,
okay, I got it.
Hey, listen, I've been telling you guys, I've got many discussions already pre-written and prepared for any time that you need another guest discussion or topic. I'm your fall guy, so your fallback guy. When you've got nothing else to talk about, you can always rely on me. I've already got it pre-written.
That sounds perfect.
That's just what we need, the fall guy. No, Thunderous is of Pakistan. He can be whatever you want him to be. Like you just heard, he's good for anything. Whether he's Pakistani or Indian or Australian, doesn't really matter. I saw Harris is here somewhere. What's he doing up so early in the morning?
I refer to myself as actually when I'm at work as being Persian. I'm half English, half Persian.
Are you really?
I do. Because
the Farsi Baladi?
Huh?
Farsi? Do you speak Farsi?
No, I don't. I speak Urdu. I speak Punjabi, a little bit of Polish, a little bit of Romanian and such. But no Farsi. No Farsi.
Okay, so there, yes, I saw. Yeah, that's Richard Dawkins' quote. I saw Harris's name come up here just now in the chat. Mister, what are you doing up so early? Yes, come on. Don't you have anything better to do on a Saturday morning? But thank you for being here. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. Brilliant. It's good to know that there's people who are interested in this. Super. Okay, Thunderous, what is your opinion? Okay, what is your opinion on Palestine? Let me ask you this one.
I know that the argument that the Muslim religion would have is that Israel doesn't, Israel doesn't have the rights to the land by some Old Testament deed poll. I think that's the rhetoric that I've normally come across. But then, if that's the logic that they're going to apply, what right do they have to the land anyway? Because their possession of the land was via conquest, not invitation. So if somebody, if you buy a plot of land, or you inherit a plot of land, or if you acquire a plot of land, somebody by force removes you from the land, then you, after some unspecified period of time, come back somewhat armed with your own mercenaries, if you like, to remove the squatters or those who have taken over your land. Then I will refer to that as repossession. So my opinion is, really, I look at it from a historical point of view, that the Jews have merely repossessed what was theirs.
Was it theirs?
Okay, but okay, it is theirs by default. If you go, there are no Philistines or Canaanites around anymore. Those kind of people are gone now. So the next, if you like, inline default, if it was some kind of inheritance where you're looking for the nearest relative, as far as that land's concerned, the nearest historical relative to that land would be the nation of Israel. I'm not siding with them. Please don't think I'm...
Yeah, no, that's not the point. No, because I have problems with the word Israelites, assigning that to a specific area, a specific region, a specific border, the same way as I don't see the ethnicity of Palestinians.
Yeah, I'm merely looking at it from a historical point of view of how many times the land has changed hands, as it were, and who's taken ownership or custodianship of it. To me, it's an irrelevance. To the Muslims, it's a significance, but it gives them an opportunity for a lot of rhetoric and sympathy votes, and for the ignorant and the naive and the obtuse to fall into that entrapment of sympathy as far as their claim of foreign policy is concerned.
What is your opinion on free speech?
Well, free speech is very much that. It's free speech. If you can't have an opinion, I think I've said, we've had this discussion before, maybe at a smaller level perhaps, but we've not really gone into it too much. But for me, it's either free speech or it's not. There is no, if you start curtailing or infringing or deciding as to what is and what isn't right to say or wrong to say, then it's no longer free speech. It's chaperoned speech. It is controlled speech. It is political speech. So you either have free speech or you don't.
So this United Nations decision is also silly.
I've been following that. I mean, this is where I turn around and say things like truth has become hate speech, facts have become hate speech, logic has become hate speech. If you speak in a logical way, a factual way, a historical way, or a truthful way, it seems to be you're offending somebody with this now. If you call Muhammad if you call Muhammad a child abuser, okay, I can understand that some people are going to be offended by that, but when you go to the historical narrative of the Quran and the Hadith, what other conclusion can you draw from the sources that
exactly
subscribe to? And I would go one further, because my arguments always be with Muslims. Then, by implication, default, you support, as a Muslim, it's what I call communal responsibility. If you're making the claim that you're a Muslim, then there are 1.5 billion people on this planet that support 54-year-old men having sex with 9-year-old girls. You have no choice but to agree with it if that's the narrative you're going to subscribe to and agree. That is quite dangerous. You cannot sift at it like salt out of pepper. You either accept the Quran and the Hadith or you don't. If you don't accept it, you're an apostate. That's where I stand on it.
Mm.
You wouldn't think of, if you went to any other religion and had that kind of speech leveled at them, I don't think you'd find that there would be, railing against it with, you've got a phobia of what I believe or what I stand for, or you're not being accurate or you're misrepresenting or anything. I think they would just take it. Other religions seem to be, they have a thick skin and a certain resilience to criticism. The Islamic religion that's supposed to be the religion of peace seems to be quite fragile and belligerent and brittle.
If you look at the discussions that people are having now, because we're talking about the discussion between Muslims and Christians, how do you see these discussions as being helpful for either side?
I don't think they're being. I think there might be an agenda there behind there somewhere, because if it infringes on the rights of Islam, then it's going to affect other religions too. I think there's a certain fear factor as well, because if you make, I mean, I think I said this several weeks ago about a guy I saw once in my local town wearing a T-shirt that said, "You don't mind me saying this, but I speak it verbatim: Jesus is a cunt." Nobody would be offended by that, and the moment that they took offence and wanted to be belligerent with that, then by implication they're no longer Christian anymore, because you have to turn the other cheek or to ignore such insults. With the Islamic religion, I find that if you uphold anything that subscribes to an insult towards Islam, then in effect you're supporting the insults, and then you make yourself a target too. So I think that there could well be a lot of fear in the side of non-Muslims are upholding these blasphemy laws or free speech infringement laws, because if they don't, then they're merely putting a target on their own back. I'll give an example. I mean, historical examples, we have many. The woman that named the teddy bear Muhammad, riots. One person commented when the Miss World was in Nigeria about, well, if Muhammad was here, he'd have one of these as his wife. 18 people died as a result of that. So I think there's a certain fear that's prevalent within the politician and legal system, that if you allow people to make any comments, whether it's reality based or not, the person themselves becomes the target, and those who uphold that freedom to make such comments, they're making themselves targets too. And I think that's where I stand on it.
Okay, yeah.
They probably have that fear, but it's strategically very stupid, because by doing that you will only prolong.
It's a paradox. I say you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you uphold these laws that allow with facts and truth and logic for it to be interpreted that the religion of Islam is being offended, even when you're actually quoting the Qur'an, you're damned if you uphold the law for free speech, because then you make yourself a target. But you're damned if you uphold like the banning of people making these comments, and you're banning yourself for making yourself a target of people that aren't going to hurt you physically. You're only going to have words labeled at you. You're only going to be labeled at you: weakness, cowards, or why did you allow this to happen? It's not going to go beyond any rhetoric than that.
I would argue that you will be much more damned in the long run if you don't defend freedom of speech, because partly you have violated like the most basic thing that our societies are built for, and like things like freedom of speech, that's what I mean your ancestors died for in the world wars, and and in the long term more people will die if you don't.
But the thing is, to see, when you talk about free speech, we're highlighting the religion of Islam, but there are other religions that are kind of brittle too. I mean, well, I say only one other one that comes to mind, and that's the Jewish religion. You can't say anything about the Holocaust without it actually being a legal matter. You can actually get prosecuted for it. Then, if you have comments that are negative towards the gay and homosexual community, you can you could be tarred and feathered. So there are other areas where it's not just the Islamic religion. The Islamic religion is probably the top, and it's the beacon of anti-free speech. But there are other legs to this as well that are supporting the beacon of Islam in this. You can't say anything without somebody being offended.
Yeah, but I like, just because people are offended by it, like in the long run, it will only lead to more and more totalitarianism and more outrage. If people just get used to that people can say stupid things, And maybe sometimes it's not stupid, it may just be facts, but like it's so stupid. I don't know.
Yeah, but then you can't say anything because there's always going to be somebody who's going to be offended or insulted by anything that somebody might just say.
But
Yeah,
You can't
that's the
always run
point.
around always thinking, what is everybody else who's ever going to hear this going to think about this? You can't be so neutral with everything that you are never going to offend anybody. That's impossible in my eyes.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you, Stops. But this is the world, or this is what the world's becoming. You can't, in certain areas, use gender-oriented titles like Mr. or Mrs. or Sir or Madam, because the gender non-binary, the gender fluid, the gender neutral are offended by such titles. So it's and the alarming thing for me in all of this is that when you look at the percentages of, say, the Muslim population in England or the gender non-binary population in England, if you look at the percentage ratios as far as the population is concerned, it is the minority that are controlling the language of the majority. That's where my fear is, that a small amount of people are controlling, let's say, for instance, the gender non-binary. Let's grossly inflate the figure and assume that the figure in England is 2%. That means that the 2% are controlling the language of the other 98%.
Exactly.
And I don't even think that
that's what's happening with the religion of Islam, and that is happening systematically all through Europe. You're finding that
when we did things with non-binary gender dudes and girls, not
dudes and girls. You're not allowed to say that. Remember, just because a person's got a penis, it doesn't mean.
Okay, but like, look, I'm not even sure that the majority of trans people are for these draconian laws. It's just it's probably even a minority among trans people. You see what I'm saying?
No, you know what? You've got a very valid point there, because I actually work with, or did. I got made redundant this week, so worked, past tense rather. But I actually worked with two lesbians, very good friends, got on really well with them. They know my stand on their lifestyle, and they're very respectful, as I'm respectful towards them. And they themselves are infuriated and indignant towards this, the gay pride movement and all these other rainbow wearing groups, in as much that they don't subscribe or agree with it either. So it's interesting that, yet again, even within these certain groups, where, let's say, for instance, of the 2% population, let's just say that's what, 1 million, you'll find probably about 600,000 of that 1 million, which is probably about 60%, don't actually agree with the language and rhetoric and dialogue of the other 40%.
Yeah.
But the thing is, yet again, the 60% seem to be silent, yet they're the greater majority, in the same way the 98% seem to be reticent to say anything against the 2% that seem to have the loudest voice.
I was reading about a little bit, or I got a kind of a spur of interest in the Russian Revolution and what happened. And it's kind of funny that the Bolshevik part of the revolution was not really the majority. They actually had a vote even, and the Bolsheviks lost. But because they were so well organized and they just so forceful,
militant.
Yeah, they completely squashed the majority. The majority of the Russian revolutions were actually what we today would say maybe social democrats or something like that.
When I see this and I look at it from a historical perspective, I sometimes can't help but think that these movements have very cleverly hijacked, if you like, for want of a better expression, or copied or absorbed the tactics and attitudes of the civil rights movements of the 50s and the 60s, and they're playing that same game, only using their own agenda with it.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody in the chat have any more questions? Otherwise, we're going to have a very short show today. Okay, is there anything, why are so many Muslims leaving? Is there anything can do? No, we've answered that. I don't think that Muslims can do anything to stop the tide of apostates, because like I said, Islam is incredibly weak. I need to finish that video because I was so irritated when I saw this comment that somebody said Islam is so resilient and so strong. No, it's very incredibly weak. As soon as a Muslim starts asking questions, it's game over.
The thing
That's
is,
it.
in what sense are they suggesting that the religion is resilient? It's certainly not resilient to criticism. If it was, then why is it that Google and such other search engines in Muslim-controlled countries are having to limit what information is accessible to the populations of those countries? So it can't be that resilient. Then you have the apostasy laws, where if you leave the religion, that you're it's a death penalty. So it's not resilient in that sense. It's not resilient when you make a comment about the Prophet of the Prophet Muhammad. Then somebody has to die. So it's not resilient in that area. I would like for a Muslim to give me an example of Islamic resilience. It's
I think
certainly
it's
not.
wishful thinking.
Sorry.
No, it's just wishful thinking.
If you look at it from a historical point of view, Islam is not resilient. If you look at it from a logical point of view, Islam is not resilient. If you look at it from a scientific point of view, Islam is not resilient. If you look at it from their, a literary point of view, Islam is not resilient. Give me one avenue where Islam is resilient.
I mean, it's resilient in the sense that it's perfectly adapted to hijack the limbic system of a person's brain, and also to say that like it's socially resilient. Like you create this kind of sectarian environment where you have this very kind of a certain kind of collectivistic society around this religion. So it's partly as like a social thing, and it's partly this that you hijack the limbic system by creating a fear of hellfire and a hope for a reward in paradise.
It is what you're saying there describes, and when I first saw the episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where they presented the Borg, I thought to myself, that is one amazing piece of writing there, because ever since I've seen that episode, the first episode of, I'm not going on a tangent here, but what you're saying there, and the Borg, if you remember the evil entity that they are, you will be assimilated, very much like Islam. Death is irrelevant, resistance is futile, and we will absorb your technologies for our further advancement. And it's got a cube, that might be some kind of other coincidence that they put in there. But whoever wrote the scientific entity of the Borg must have had Islam in mind, because everything you see about the Borg and everything you see about the Islamic religion is almost like a blueprint or a carbon copy. And
I'm
that's
not
what you did.
I'm not sure he had Islam in mind, but I think there are kind of some universals. Like it's not only in Islam. It's again, if we talk about Russia and what happened in Russia after the revolution, I think both Islam and like the communism taps into the same kind of biological systems.
But I don't think they had an ideology where death is irrelevant.
Well, in a sense, like it's irrelevant. The individual's death is irrelevant because it's the society that matters. Like
I know their attitude is, death is irrelevant, because the cause is more important than the person.
Yeah,
which is the opposite of Christianity, because in Christianity, the cause was for the person.
Yeah, for the redemption. But the
RB47. I'm sorry.
But I think they have a kind of redemption in communism. I mean, the redemption is that you will live on in the communist utopia in the future. So even if you are not to experience it, you in the dudes in the future will.
RB47, I can't believe it. I mean, these are the topics we've just covered a few minutes ago. So no, we won't be talking about them.
Can I ask one thing, that if you want to understand why Islam religion is so resilient, some people might hate me for this, but I think the works of Ernest Becker, this the denial of death, is an interesting take on it. I think there's a documentary also called The Denial of Death.
I haven't read the article. I've never heard of it before. Is that to suggest that the afterlife is so real to them that they see death as irrelevant? Is that the
No,
point?
no, no. What the point is that we, like human beings, like animals, they suffer all the physical pains that we humans also suffer. But in addition to that, we human beings also has this death anxiety because we are aware of our own mortality, and that creates such a huge anxiety in us that our psychology or our brain or whatever wants to deny death, and we are inventing all kinds of tools to deny the fact that we are mortal. And one of those tools are inventing an afterlife, and then we become very attached to this ideology that will save us from death and so on. It's a long story, but
But then that's not death, then, is it? That's just a transference, isn't it? A transmigration of the soul from one dimension to another.
yeah, but that's what we humans want to do. We want to deny our own mortality because it creates so much anxiety when you think.
But even that doesn't make sense. From any perspective, because when the human brain dies, because all the experiences of the human being are contained within the brain. Now, if the person dies, or when the person dies rather, there isn't some kind of like spiritual backup that contains all that information for whatever dimension they're going to go to.
Yeah. That is correct. I mean, you have this famous Epicurean argument that I don't remember the exact quote, but like, when I am, death is not, and when death is, I am not. Therefore, there is no reason to be afraid of death. However, it seems that most people's cognitive faculties doesn't tune into that really. But the thing is, I also have a theory why this is the case, and I think evolution by natural selection has in the human psyche created this concept of a self, that we are a self, which when you think about it is actually not it's not necessary. Like there is for example, V.S. Ramachandran, who is a neuroscientist, he talks about consciousness that we were talking about in the beginning of the show, and the self, the sense of being a self, is two sides of the same coin, which I think is false. I actually think the self is just one feature that can appear in consciousness, in the same sense like the taste of chocolate, for example. The taste of chocolate is not necessary for conscious experience. It's just that evolution has created the sense of self, and because it is ongoing all the time while we are awake, at least for most of us, we are so attached to this idea, and it's really the disappearance of the self I think we are afraid of. But I actually think that there is a way out from this denial of death syndrome.
If evolution has done that, then if evolution has allowed the human brain to compute this other dimension because of the inability of human beings to comprehend their own mortality, then by implication, then every human being that has this, if you like, default of believing into an afterlife because they can't accept their own mortality are merely following the progress of evolution in the first place.
No. Let me
listen, guys. How much time are we going to spend on this?
Sorry.
Not much more, but let me explain. When I say this self, I think the reason why evolution by natural selection has created this experience of being a self is not because it helps us deny death or anything. That is merely like it. Having the experience of being a self makes you a better survival machine for your genes. And I think someone that doesn't have this experience of being a self probably will be hospitalized because you can't really function. However, that doesn't mean that the self really exists. If you look at the process, yeah, but let's set a little bit. This is important. If you look at everything that is going on in your body, all the atoms in your body are constantly changing. There's probably not a single atom in your body now that was the same as 9 years ago, but you're still thinking that you are the same self as you were 9 years ago, or the same person. This is just a concept. It doesn't really exist. So this concept, this experience, evolution by natural selection has programmed it into our brain, and we have this, and this as a side effect, this creates the anxiety of this self ceasing to exist.
Yes,
And
everybody
this,
knows.
yeah, okay, sorry.
Okay, can we go back? Thank you very much for that excursion into the self and into consciousness. I have a very mundane question. Can Islam be reformed?
No, because the only way you can how to reform Islam is to rewrite the Quran and the
Exactly.
Hadith. So
Are women going to have 4 husbands?
Women won't be having any, because I seem to recall a hadith that most of the denizens of hell are going to be women because they were ungrateful to their husbands. So I see. Yeah, again, that's the subject. I mean, this is why I watch a lot of like the official Muslim channels like Peace TV or Huda or the other ones, because for me, I'm getting the official line, and they very rarely want to touch on the woman's position when she goes to heaven. For me, it's a case of that's what Islam teaches. That's how it is. To use a principle, don't go beyond the things written. If that's what it says, that's what it says. Stick with it.
What about you?
I think it's possible to reform somewhat in the short term, but in the long term, the fundamentalists will always win because they will always have the stronger argument. So you can, yes, for in the short term, maybe you can reform it for a while, but after a few generations or even maybe a few decades, they will just return back to fundamentalism again.
But can I just comment on that? Can I just comment on that, please, briefly?
Sure.
Briefly.
Firstly, if you're reforming it, you're changing it, and then it no longer becomes Islam if you reform it. Islam is Islam the way that it is in the Quran and Hadith. That is Islam. And I hate with a passion when people use the term fundamentalists or extremists. The peaceful Muslim is the fundamentalist. The peaceful Muslim is the extremist. The one that sits in America or in England or in Europe that minds his neighbor, is very polite, pays his taxes. That's the fundamental Muslim. The Muslim that follows what Muhammad said, follows his example, gets himself a girl that he can have sex with when she's 9 years old, has the opinions against the Jews. There's a tree who's going to shout out, "Look, there's a Jew behind me, kill him." That believes that there's a giant copper-covered iron wall somewhere between two mountains, that Muhammad split the moon, and it's okay to kill Jews. That's the true, honest Muslim. That's the real Muslim.
That's the end of briefly.
Sorry. The emotion started going.
What is the opinion on Imran Khan, the guy in Pakistan? I have personally nothing because I don't know the guy. I just know he used to be a cricketer, and that's all. Oh, by the way, reform Islam would be bid'ah. Bid'ah is something else. Bid'ah is the introduction of a new concept. So bid'ah is a little bit different. A reform would be to, as Thunderer said, you'd have to rewrite it completely. The whole concept would fall away. So bid'ah is something slightly different. Okay, Imran Khan.
My inclination is, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I think it's interesting that he was married to Jemima Goldsmith once, and we know the influence that family has on politics. So I think that's the only comment I can make on that.
Abu?
I've lost my train of thought.
Imran Khan.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
Okay. Can you explain the bound flesh miracle and how the Quran got it wrong that you touched on earlier? Okay, yeah, that's quick. The Quran says that the flesh is draped around the bone, whereas in reality we have flesh dying around the bone to form fingers, for example, because the limb bud is being generated simultaneously in one shot. So you have the cartilage and you have the flesh, you have different tissue types, you have the muscle types, you have the, and so on. And then the flesh in between the digits dies, which is the opposite of what the Quran says. So it's not being draped around the bones, but it actually dies. So it's the opposite. Should we just give up after that Austrian woman was fined for saying that? Have the Muslims almost won? Well,
no, we should not give up. This is the same. We should go out and protest. I don't understand why there should be huge demonstrations against this.
yeah, I agree. Yes, the Muslims are winning, or they have already won, because we are talking about this. We are talking about giving up the freedom of speech, which is one of, I mean, this is the most important cornerstone of democracy of today's society, in my eyes, in my opinion. Okay, and I think this is crazy. What is happening at the moment is telling the Muslims, here you go, have our planet, put Sharia everywhere. We are going to submit to Islam. This is what we're doing at the moment. And this is what the goody two-shoes in the court are trying to do. I don't know if I gave you the example of the reporter, journalist, who was condemned to 6 months, who was sentenced to 6 months in jail because he criticized Islam. And this is where we are today. This is where we are going, that we are no longer allowed to even criticize Islam. We are no longer allowed to say anything about Muhammad, even if it is quoting from the Sunnah. And this is the problem that I see, that by allowing the intolerant, or by having the tolerance for the intolerant, this is what's killing us. That's my opinion.
I kind of think with this free speech that there's somewhat another game being played here. I remember once reading an article how the world would be a better place if they removed all religion. But to do that, you'll need a catalyst in order to exercise that. And sometimes I look at the world scene the way that it is, and I can't help but think that allowing the Islamic religion all these freedoms, knowing that there's it's going to cause an upheaval or a backlash or a frustration or a schism or a tension in non-Muslim countries with all this, almost to get on side, if you like, an agreement amongst people, a tacit agreement amongst people to get rid of religion, because they'll be sick of all the freedoms that are being given to the religion of Islam.
Yeah. And this is the problem, because I don't understand how a court, how judges, educated people can't see the consequences of their actions. I can't understand how they can be so blind that they will not realize what they are doing is handing over the keys. This is what I don't understand.
But the thing is I don't think they are blind stops. If you and I and other panelists that have been on this program over the years are not blind to this, and we're not educated in law to the extent that judges are. They've got years or decades of years of experience. They've got court cases that they can refer to in the past with reference to this. This is where I'm saying that there's another game being played here. They're not doing it blindly. I'm saying they're doing it deliberately. They can't be that obtuse and naive or ignorant to the backlash as to what's going to happen or what frustrations it's going to cause.
You're saying that they actually want to hand this over to Sharia?
I'm not saying no, because it's never going to get to that state, is it? It won't be allowed to get that far. But the if you like, the backlash or the frustration that it's causing, like programs like this, like people like you, myself, and other people that are around Europe, sitting around round tables, making comments as to what's going on. That's what they want, if you like, and they're using the Islamic religion as a proxy to generate that dialogue. I don't believe for a minute a judge can make a decision like that, or through several court cases and appeals going up further into to the European Court, where the judges are all in agreement, coming out with the same point. Unless there's an agenda for the judges, we want you to say, in agreement that this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong.
So maybe they're pushing it so that we do go on the streets and protest and overthrow the whole thing.
No, I'm not saying overthrow, but for me, there is some kind of end game in all of this, because the judges are not that naive or ignorant. These are educated men, sophisticated men, educated in their field to have the positions that they have. They've got
In their
years
field.
or decades.
In their field.
Yes, exactly. So they're not making naive, ignorant, or obtuse judgments.
I think they are. I think that they're mistaking, because I hear this a lot from educated people. There's a lot of people who are saying, well, it's a religion. And they don't realize that Islam is not a religion. And this is what always gets me. They compare, because they have Jesus, they compare Muslims to Christians, which you can't.
But I don't think that there could be, I mean, the access to information now, and even in their own social circle, they must have people that are showing them, well, actually, this is what the Islamic religion teaches. I don't think anybody can be that naive to the Islamic religion anymore.
They do. This is what the judge said to the guy. You are going to go to jail for 6 months, and I'm going to put you on probation, and the condition of the probation is that for 3 years you will not criticize Islam.
By telling the truth. So you're telling
yes.
me, so if I say Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl when he was 54, stating his
not allowed.
I'm not allowed to say that.
You're not allowed to say that. This was the condition of the bail that this is a female judge, that she was setting as a bail condition for the journalist. And the guy says, hang on, you are telling me I need to quit my job?
But the thing is, the judge must have looked at the case and thought, well, let's see if this accusation is true. Did Muhammad have sex with a 9-year-old girl at the age of 54?
No, that's not the point. You're not allowed to say it.
Yeah, but I can't understand how the judge would turn around and say, let's say some kind of agenda. Why would the judge? Because at what point, where would you draw the line that you can't say that?
This is exactly the point.
Ducks, don't quack. It's because ducks are offended when you accuse them of quacking. Where did you want to draw the line? This is getting silly then.
It is, and this is why the question is so valid. Should we give it up? After the Austrian woman was fine. Have the Muslims always won? And this is the point. He went there with the hadith and said, this is Islamic literature. This is what it says. And I am only quoting the texts.
But I mean, in fairness, Stops, I mean, this goes back years and years, and it doesn't really originate with the Islamic religion. I mean, I'm thinking now, things that come into my mind are things like, you can't say, blackboard anymore because black people are offended. You have to refer to it as a chalkboard, or you can't say nursery rhymes like blah, blah, black sheep, because even though there are sheep that are black, you can't say black sheep because black people are offended by it.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, yeah.
So the Islamic religion is probably a little bit more, if you like, as I say, it's that beacon for it now, where we've seen this before in other areas, but not so pronounced.
I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. And this is why I'm hoping that more people are going to voice their disgust. I don't know if you can write a letter to the European court and tell them, listen, you guys are mad. This is what you're doing. Think of what you're doing. Anyway, is the caliphate, or is a caliphate by GPZ, is that a good idea?
Who's they going to have? Zakir Naik? I mean, who's going to spearhead the caliphate? Who are they going to?
And this is exactly the question: is a caliphate a good idea, and who's going to be in charge? And this is the whole point: can you, or yes or no? Because I maintain a caliphate is a very good idea, because then you have one person that you can go to, and who is going to be the spokesperson. Because at the moment, Islam is just a concept. It's a wishy-washy idea. There's nobody responsible. There's nobody that you can grab. There's nobody who will explain it to you. Everybody has their own opinion. So you have 1.5 billion Muslims and 1.5 billion different versions of Islam.
That's why I am.
That's how it works.
I'm announcing that I am officially the caliph.
Yeah. Well, you know the conditions, but I think it would be a good idea, because then you can actually talk. At the moment, it's very difficult to talk to somebody because there's nobody in charge.
Are you going to make that public that you're the new caliph? Because if you are, I'll make sure you wrote your will first.
What do you think about Vidovid's joke on the poor Rohingya children? Has he gone too far? Can somebody fill me in? What joke? Nobody knows. Okay. If he made a joke about, okay, I don't know the joke. Has he gone too far? I don't think that anything that you can make I think you can make a joke about anything. And has he gone too far? I think it's very difficult. And I have actually a lot of trust in Vidu, and I don't think that he is a person who will go too far. Okay, Dawam is saying Vidovitz said he was going to eat all the Rohingya children's aid food. Oh, shit. Okay, no, that's not going too far. And I don't think that's a joke. I think that's more like satire. So I don't think it's going too far. I think it's it's pretty ridiculous. So I don't know. I don't think we need to comment on that. How do you make the Middle East secular? Okay, that's an excellent question, and I have no idea. I think it's doing it itself. Okay, all I think what it's. I don't know. Do you remember in 1985 how there was this thing where the people in East Germany in Moscow, no, in St. Petersburg, not Moscow, in St. Petersburg, were caught watching Western television, because from St. Petersburg, I think you can get the stuff from Finland pretty easy. And they were watching this the same as the people in Eastern Germany were getting the West German TV. And they were even making jokes about it. Now, people were crazy about this. So there was this influx of information, which the communist regime then, well, they called it propaganda. They said, no, this is not real. They're just making it into a make-believe world to make you think that this is the real life. And they don't actually have cars like that. They don't wear clothes like that. They don't have microwaves and things like that. No, definitely not. They don't have these phones. The curiosity of human beings is boundless. And this is what happened because the people were so interested in what was going on around them that this led to the collapse of communism. And the same thing I see happening now with Muslims, where, for example, in Iran, what did they do? They collected 100 or 1,000 or something satellite dishes and then put a steamroller over them to destroy them, because people are interested and they're getting satellite TV. Now, unfortunately, together with the Islamic Republic of Iran's news channels, Iran, they are also getting 3,000 other channels. And this is what they are watching when they are looking at Hotbird, for example. So I think the way to make the Middle East secular is just to let the internet go, get the information, just let it flow so that people realize that there is a world without Islam, and get Vidovitz and Mimsy a huge studio, much bigger than Zakir Naik's, so that he can propagate his world and his view to the Muslims. And within 3 years, they're all secular.
I mean, I think that's partly one of the ways you solve it, but you also, people have to do things. You have to, for those of you who visit the Middle East, you have to have the testicular fortitude to talk with people. And for those who know Arabic, you have to translate things into Arabic.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. People are so skeptical. They have been brought up with this skepticism towards foreigners. Like if I would say this, they would say, yeah, but you're a foreigner, you have to say that. And of course, automatically, if you are not a Muslim, you are a Christian. And when I came in there, they couldn't understand that I was neither. They didn't understand it. They did not have an understanding of the concept of a non-believing human being. They couldn't handle this.
Yeah, but I think you even, like, for me, it's easier since I speak the language, but even you, I think you make a difference. Like, they may not show it, and they may outwardly, they may show resilience to it, but you probably have changed some people's minds.
I think you use the word skepticism stops, but do you not think the word should be that they're growing up with a prejudice? Because that's certainly mine.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Better.
And all things West, because I seem to recall, when being brought up as a Muslim, the rhetoric, they'll never accept you, you'll never be like one of them, they won't want you, that kind of I suppose it's not brainwashing, but that kind of mind control and prejudice creating. So even before you walk out the door, you're already on. You got your haunches up, so to speak, towards anybody.
Correct. What is quite funny is the looks that my wife got when girls came in, because you have a lot of girls coming in. I mean, they have the separate area, but they came in through the hall. And when they saw us sitting there chatting to the guys on the weekend, they would come in, go into the big hall for the prayers, and they would look at my wife with long blonde hair, and she dresses quite chic. She likes the outer appearance and that, and she has this girlish style, and the looks that I could see that the girls were throwing in her direction. You can see the envy. You can see that the girls don't really want to wear this abaya. They don't want to hide away. They would like to be able to show the hair and show the bodies and to walk around like a normal person. You can see this. And how does that where does that come from? Well, it comes from the information. They know that such a thing exists. There you go.
It reminds me of there's a movie called Gattaca, and
yes,
every movie that you watch now or in the front cover,
with the guy who actually puts the hair and everything on the keyboard.
But the caption at the end on the front cover of the movie is that there's no gene for the human spirit. I thought it was a fantastic, one of the best phrases I've ever seen on the front cover of a movie. And that's exactly, in my opinion, what I have seen. What you're describing is what I've seen. Where you're watching, even the Muslim men as well, looking at other non-Muslim men, knowing that they can never have what you're experiencing, they can never taste what you're experiencing, and it breeds it's like a frustration and an anger and a hatred that they can only express overtly on you because they're seeing you have what they will never have. They will. I
wonder how long
they know it,
and I wonder how long it lasts. What they are being told that they are actually the better people for it, and I wonder how long that lasts.
But I dare say, many of them are wrong. I know that it's wrong. I certainly knew it was wrong, but I had the advantage of being, growing up in England, and I had one of those personalities, or possess a personality that allows me to stand up to, the religion that it is. But there are many men and women that they say they know it's wrong, and this is where I had the conversation with TJ several months ago, where this is where it becomes sometimes more than the religion, but the culture, because the same thing happens with the Sikhs and the Hindus and they say other religions as well, where the culture also has a hold and a firm grip on you with ostracism, disrespect, pride, and all the other psychological control mechanisms that the culture and religion has on a person, so that they don't bring that kind of reproach on the family name.
Having lived in Doha, what is your opinion? Well, look, this is my approach. I'm looking at the people, and people in Doha are very accommodating. They're very tolerant. They're very flexible. They're very hospitable. I did not meet any person who was where I would say there was any animosity. Now, you need to appreciate, I would not wear this non-belief on the sleeve. Okay, I would not immediately go out and put this on my forehead. I don't believe what you believe. I will just behave like a normal human being, and therefore you blend in. And it's only when I was in Fana, for example, where I would say, look, I'm being honest with you. I don't believe that. That's why they called me the crazy atheist, because they couldn't handle that I knew something about Islam, but I was not a Muslim. And this is what they. But Doha itself, I mean, there's not much to it. Okay, what can you do? You have the water, which is limited because you don't have this culture where you spend time in the ocean, because you need to be covered up. You need to cover your aura all the time. So going into the water is not actually something that you see all the time. And Muslims are not the best when it comes to sailing, when it comes to also, but I mean, you have water sports. Yes, you have it. I mean, kiting is brilliant because you have pieces on the south coast which are always perpendicular with the wind, and it's brilliant to go kiting there. Then you have the desert where you can do excursions, where you can go on the quads, where you can do all things like that out in the desert. But that's basically it. So there's not a lot to do. Otherwise, you spend time in, in the various shopping centers, and that's it. There's no cinemas. There's no. They started then in the hotels. They started having comedy nights and entertainment packages like this. But other than that, it's a very quiet area, very sedate, and it's. I mean, you have the South African brides and things like that, but other than that, it's just, it's normal people. So I enjoyed it because Dubai for me is like terribly fake. So, I mean, even the Mall of the Emirates, brilliant. Yes, you can go skiing there. But then you have Villaggio in Doha, for example, where you can go ice skating. Okay, big deal. So my overall opinion was I had lots of fun there, but I think it's what you do, what you make of it. If you go there with it, I mean, I've had colleagues there who said, "Oh, this is shit. There's nothing to do. It's so boring." I said, "Yeah, sure. You can come there with that attitude, and it's going to be boring, and it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be like, going to jail for 5 years. Sure, but you can also make something of it and make the best of the situation. And you quickly fly over to Dubai. It's like half an hour." Brilliant. So why not? They are unhappy with all the money they have. Would you say that they are unhappy? No, they're not unhappy. No, not at all. Yes, the per capita income is the highest in the world in Doha, and they have a lot of toys. You see the most fantastic cars. You see the camel races. You see a whole lot of things. But then again, you have the Qatar Foundation, for example, which is very much geared towards modern education, which is modern science. So you have this stretch, you have this strain of Muslims who are going towards scientific education. And it's getting more and more. So this is what I'm saying. You just leave the Middle East and it will become secular over time.
But how secular do you think it could become? Do you think it would become totally secular, or do you not think that?
No,
it's on a leash, so to speak. This scientific, it's on a leash.
It's a good question. It's a good point that you're raising. You can't. The way that Islam is geared, you can't have a secular Islam. That's impossible, because they're always going to say that Sharia is, a higher level, because it's Allah's law, and Allah is the creator of the universe, and he should know better than anyone else what the laws are for the human beings that he created. So you're always going to have the sentiment. So it's never going to be 100% secular, but it's going to be more cultural than fundamental.
I think it seems to me that what you're describing there is where they're allowing a secularism in particular areas where it wouldn't infringe on the religion of Islam.
Correct. At the moment, that is exactly how it is. But it's getting more and more in this direction. More and more people. I mean, people came after a while in the office even, because Muslims will not talk about Islam in the work environment. But after a while, people came to me and said, "What does it say in the Quran? Does it say 6 or 7 days that it took Allah to create the universe?" They came to me to ask me questions like this. So this was quite funny.
That's not absolutely abnormal, though, isn't it? Because you probably had to do this many times, as many people do as I know I've had to. When you speak to a Muslim, you not only have to tell him what you yourself believe, you have to tell the Muslim what they believe, because they don't know what they believe either. You have to explain 2 religions at the same time, or 2 faiths at the same time, yours and theirs.
Okay, is that it? TJ, we're going off. I mean, I don't think it's worth, unless you have like a really urgent topic. Otherwise, I would say let's call it a night. We've done 2 hours, and I think it's enough, because I don't want to simply stretch it just for the sake of stretching it. I think we've answered the question. Opinion on Adnan Rashid. Okay, that's very quick. Total fool, total idiot. He's been running away from me for as long as I can remember, because he's too scared of anybody who knows a little bit about Islam. I've critiqued him. I've done 2 videos on. No, I've done 3 videos on him. 2 where he got slapped around, and 1 where he totally failed. So, okay, that's it.
Stop. So if you need a topic, just say, give me a week's notice, and I can always put something together. Just
brilliant, yeah. Because during the week, like I said, I'm rarely doing anything. So thank you very much for the offer. Yes, and it's your own fault if I take you up on it.
No. I'm welcome to. Just give me a couple of days' notice, so I can sort of like get the verbatim ready and prepared in my head. But also, I don't know if it's possible, if you could kind of, with what you're going to discuss, if you can sort of like put that out sort of a couple of days prior, because one of the things I'd like to do is do some research on the discussions that you're going to do.
I didn't know an hour ago, 2 hours.
Okay, so then I can do some research and bring something to the table on the very subject you're bringing up as well.
No, because Rob only, knew. Well, he found out today that he will not be able to join, or that because the original plan was to join later, and he said he's probably going to join an hour ago, but it looks like he didn't make it. So he says, "What are you going to do? Do you want to drop the entire show?" I said, "No, because I've got some questions from guys and from last week." And I was sure that there were going to be some questions coming up. And I think for me, it's been very entertaining getting questions from the chat, from people, what they're interested in, what they want to know. So I think this is a lot of fun. And then if I've got people like you and Apu, then this is fun doing it, just chatting about it. So yeah, that's great. So I thank you very much for both of you for appearing here and for coming on the show. And if there is anything that we want to do, then I'll definitely take you up on that. Thank you for the offer, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Any closing words?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, see you next week. Goodbye from the Gin and Tonic Show. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.